Max Verstappen gets blasted for that move on Lewis Hamilton. McLaren's horrible calls could create a bad environment despite having a good car and drivers, and Mercedes' choice for a second driver just became easier. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Nico Rosberg sarcastically urged someone to tell Max Verstappen that it was actually a corner where he collided with Lewis Hamilton in Hungary, after Verstappen pinned the blame on Hamilton. Hamilton and Verstappen engaged in a thrilling two-part battle at the Hungarian Grand Prix, Hamilton successfully holding off Verstappen in part 1, before Verstappen returned for another attack in the final stint, as the former title rivals battled over the final place on the podium. The end result was contact. Verstappen sent it down the inside of Hamilton at turn 1, Verstappen locking both front wheels and briefly going airborne as he clipped the front right wheel of Hamilton's Mercedes. Speaking to Sky F1 after the race, Verstappen pointed the finger firmly at Hamilton. Asked if his frustration spilled over into that battle, Verstappen, having vented over team radio multiple times about his Hungarian GP strategy, the Dutchman replied, "I don't think so. I mean, I went for a move that was fully on. But then in the middle of the braking zone, when I'm already committed, of course, to the move, he suddenly just keeps warping right, and if I wouldn't have turned while braking straight, I would have made contact with him. So at one point, yeah, naturally I lock up, because he just keeps on turning to the right." People obviously made a lot about what happened in Austria, which is not correct, blah blah blah. But that's on the initial move, and then you just brake straight. You hold your wheel quite straight. And I felt like now it was not on the initial movement. Afterwards, during the braking zone, he keeps turning right. You cannot do that when someone has committed to the inside. That's why I locked up, because otherwise, we would have collided anyway because he would have just turned in on me. I don't think that was wrong. I went for a move that was fully on. I don't think I braked too late. But I'm assuming here that maybe Max hasn't seen it yet on a TV, otherwise someone needs to tell him that was actually a corner, which is why Lewis was turning in. I mean, Lewis was taking the corner. So I'm pretty sure that he's going to get a penalty on that, 5 or 10 seconds and drop behind signs. Ultimately, the stewards took no further action, meaning Verstappen has secured the P5 position where he finished after the Hamilton collision. Lando Norris wasn't particularly interested in chatting about the team orders from McLaren, as he was told to give up the lead to Oscar Piastri. Strategic planning from McLaren resulted in the Woking-based squad being backed into an awkward corner after giving second-placed Lando Norris priority in the final stops at the Hungaroring. With Piastri having led for most of the race, Norris was in second place when he got the call to come into the pits to protect him from an attack from behind, from the likes of Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, and Max Verstappen. But the undercut resulted in Norris coming out ahead of Piastri when the Australian pitted, and the British driver was reluctant to hand back the lead, as race engineer Will Joseph pleaded with his driver to play the team game. With an impassioned message to Norris coming to tell him how championships are won with the support of a team, not as an individual, Norris yielded position with 3 laps to go to give the lead and the win to Piastri. With tensions dissipating as a result, Norris smiled as he was asked about his race immediately after the checkered flag. "Amazing day for us as a team. I think that's the main thing, honestly," he said, as McLaren claimed the 1-2. "I'm so happy. We've spent a long journey to get to achieving this on our own merits, and that's exactly what we did today, and I think a long way clear of the rest, so we did it in style as well. So a good run by the team and of course from Oscar. He had a good start. He got me off the line and he controlled the race well. It was coming at some point and he deserved it today." Asked specifically by Nico Rosberg about his thoughts on the team orders and the building tension, Norris was brief in his answer. "The team asked me to do it, so I did it, and that's it." Having claimed his first win of his career, Piastri admitted he had been getting increasingly nervous about whether his teammate would obey the instruction, the Australian having been told even before his final stop not to worry about Norris's undercut. "The longer you leave it, the more you get a bit nervous, but no, it was well executed by the team, and I think it was the right thing," he said. "I put myself in the right position at the start, and with the different strategy we had, yes, my pace probably wasn't as quick as I would have liked in the last stint, but I was still in the right position to make it happen. So yeah, well executed from the team." Lewis Hamilton said he could only laugh about the performance advantage which Max Verstappen enjoyed over him in certain corners at the Hungaroring, though their battle ended with a crash. The last of the leading trio to pit, Max Verstappen found himself in combat with his former title rival, Mercedes' Lewis Hamilton, as he looked to set back off after the McLarens. But Hamilton was staying firm in his defense. Hamilton making his second pit stop brought a pause to this battle, though it was resumed in the final stint as Verstappen again went on the attack against Hamilton. This time it ended in contact, Verstappen lunging down the inside at turn 1 and briefly sent airborne as he clipped the front right wheel of Hamilton's Mercedes. Verstappen was ultimately classified P5, while Hamilton completed the podium, though the stewards are investigating the collision. Hamilton believes it was a racing incident. Asked how nerve-wracking that Verstappen battle was, Hamilton replied, "It's not nerve-wracking. I think when you see the pace at which they close the gap in certain corners, you just laugh to yourself because it's not something I can do. Particularly in the last sector, they were very, very strong. Same as the McLarens. I mean, I saw him coming from a long way back and he was able to brake a lot later than me, but he sent it up the inside. I stayed still and he clipped the wheel and went over. So I think a racing incident." Hamilton reiterated that Mercedes lacked the pace of McLaren and Red Bull, but were able to stay in the fight, with his third podium finish in the last 4 races the reward. "The team has done a great job to continue on with pushing this car," said Hamilton. "Ultimately, we didn't have the pace of the McLarens, or did we have the pace of the Red Bulls, but we just were able to hold on at the beginning of the race. It was very, very tough to hold on, make those tires last, and obviously the close battle we had at the end was a bit hair-raising, but that's motor racing, so I'm really happy and grateful for the points. That Hungary P3 notched up Hamilton's 200th Formula One podium." Max Verstappen was in no mood for diplomacy after a terse Hungarian Grand Prix in which his frustrations boiled over. Having started from third on the grid, and 0ff color race from Red Bull saw Verstappen fall down the order as others undercut him, leading to the Dutch driver being quite wound up by the time he took the checkered flag in 5th place. Verstappen had become increasingly furious as the Hungarian Grand Prix unfolded, which started off with his Red Bull team instructing him to give up position to Lando Norris as the FIA investigated the Dutch driver for overtaking off the circuit at turn 1. Verstappen had felt wronged by the incident, and his mood wasn't improved when Lewis Hamilton undercut him to gain position for the middle stint of the race. Despite being evidently quicker than the Mercedes, Verstappen couldn't get past his former title rival and even made an uncharacteristic error when he tried to overtake him around the outside of turn 2. Undercut yet again at the final stops as Ferrari's Charles Leclerc got ahead, Verstappen was able to clear the Monegasque, but was overly optimistic trying to overtake Hamilton into turn 1 as the pair made contact. Having already displayed his fury as he'd retorted to race engineer Gianpiero Lambiase that he was trying to salvage a result after being given a SAT strategy, Verstappen was chastised by Lambiase following the Hamilton incident, as Verstappen said the Mercedes driver had moved under braking. "I'm not even going to get into a radio fight with the other teams, Max," Lambiase said. "We'll let the stewards do their thing. It's childish on the radio, Max, childish." Verstappen was summoned before the stewards after the race for the clash with Hamilton, with the incident having dropped Verstappen from a potential 3rd place down to 5th and facing the prospect of a time penalty. "They can all fuck off," was Verstappen's blunt response when he was asked for his response to comments that his criticism of the team and the nature of his radio messages had gone too far. "I mean, of course I'm annoyed, but I've been annoyed before. Sometimes you press in the radio to voice your opinion, and that's what I did today, hoping that maybe the second pit stop will be a better call. But it wasn't. But for me, that is not distracting when I'm driving. Of course I'm annoyed, but you also then focus back on what you have to do, and that's of course controlling the car." Asked whether he will have harsh words for the team in the debrief, Verstappen said he didn't expect it to be any more critical than usual. "We'll have the debrief just like always, the same stuff." Verstappen is well known for his obstreperous relationship over team radio with Lambiase, with the pair frequently sniping each other. However, their exchange during the Hungarian Grand Prix appeared more terse than usual. Asked whether this was the case, Verstappen said he didn't agree with that assessment and that he and Lambiase have had similar exchanges in the past. "I was just annoyed with today," he summed up. "Maybe the team at the time didn't realize what they did wrong, or they maybe didn't see it was so severe. But in the car, you have also different feelings. I already said yesterday that maybe some people are not on the same wavelength with it's as severe as it is. I knew it was already going to be a difficult race and beating McLaren would be tough. But then you need at least to get a P3 over the line, and even that we couldn't do. His second victory over the last 2 rounds, but first in the Formula 2 feature race format, Kimi Antonelli gave his chances of landing the Mercedes F1 2025 seat a major boost in Hungary. With Mercedes searching for the successor for their 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, team boss Toto Wolff has made no secret of their interest in promoting their junior team protege Antonelli into the Mercedes lineup next season. Mixed form in his rookie F2 campaign has increased speculation over the 17-year-old's suitability for the Mercedes drive, but he delivered a timely reminder of his credentials by putting the alternate strategy to perfect use in Hungary, winning his first feature race. This comes off the back of Antonelli claiming his first F2 victory last time out at Silverstone, where he was the class of the sprint race field in wet conditions. Starting on the hard tire, the safety car triggered by Amaury Cordial's crash proved perfect timing for Antonelli, who pitted for softs and after the restart, overtook Dennis Hauger, Enzo Fittipaldi, Gabriel Bortoleto, and finally Victor Martins, winning the race by a margin of 12.5 seconds. "I'm feeling great, to be honest," Antonelli declared understandably after the achievement. "It was a really good race, got a good start, managed to gain a few positions, and since the beginning I saw the pace was really strong. We were a bit lucky with the safety car, but we managed everything really well and I think we really deserved the win because the pace was strong today. At the start I was a bit concerned because with the first safety car everyone pitted, but then when the second safety car came out I knew it was my moment because I had the tire advantage. And I knew I had to overtake, especially in the first few laps because I had really good grip and so we do, so really happy for that." Antonelli hopes to carry this momentum through the remainder of the season, believing things are turning around after a difficult start. "It was a really emotional one," he said. "We've been struggling a little bit at the start of the season, but we're coming back. And I think today we really showed what we can do, and I'm really proud and happy for the team, because we all deserve this, and hopefully we can carry this good momentum into the next few races." That win lifted Antonelli to P6 in the 2024 F2 drivers' standings. Fernando Alonso felt that the FIA made a gross error in the way it swiftly brought out the red flag for Yuki Tsunoda's qualifying crash at Formula One's Hungarian Grand Prix. Tsunoda crashed at the exit of Turn 5 during the closing stages of Q3, with just 2 minutes and 23 seconds remaining in the session. With Tsunoda's medical light having been triggered automatically by the impact, which necessitates the instant dispatch of the medical car, plus there being debris left on the track, race control acted swiftly to bring out the red flag. It took just a little more than 10 seconds for Q3 to be stopped. That call meant that no driver could finish their laps, even if they were past the incident. This annoyed Alonso because he was on a quicker lap at the time the red flag was called, which could have potentially lifted him further up the grid. The situation was especially hard for Alonso to accept because of what he claims is a verbal agreement among teams and the FIA that if cars run off track early in a lap, then double yellows will be waved rather than a red flag. This means any cars that have not come across the incident will have to abort their laps, but it does not penalize drivers who are long past the incident. Speaking to Spanish TV station Da Zen, Alonso said, "In Q3, the FIA sometimes gets it right and sometimes makes gross errors. Today they made one because they red flagged when I was in the last corner, which is surprising. When there is an accident at Turn 8, he meant Turn 5, they normally wait for the cars to complete their laps, or that's the spoken rule. But Motorsport.com understands that while the double yellow stance is the preference in terms of dealing with cars off track, the requirement of the medical car and the scale of the incident meant that it was felt a red flag was more appropriate." Alonso's irritation at how the session ended also further grew when, after aborting his lap and returning to the pits, he was waved into parc ferme by officials. He and teammate Lance Stroll, who was running on the track behind him, both stopped their cars in the area at the start of the pit lane, where a car from the new Apple F1 film was positioned. Alonso managed to remove his steering wheel and undid his belts before officials told him that he needed to get moving again. He added, "Going into the pit lane, Lance and I were put into parc ferme. They closed the pit lane and put us into parc ferme. We got out of the car, then they told us that Q3 was going to restart. We got back in the car, they buckled us in, and because I had no more tires, I didn't go out again." It is understood that the decision by officials to waive Alonso and Stroll into Parc Ferme was because the early communication was that the session would not be able to restart after Tsunoda's red flag, and the Aston Martins were there so soon after the red flag was called. However, with race control quickly realizing that the stricken RB could be retrieved and there was enough time for cars to complete another flying lap, it was communicated that cars could return to their garages, so the two ARM-24s were told to move. Alonso suggested that the double whammy of incidents ultimately made no difference to his grid position, but was still something he struggled to understand. I had been improving by 1/10.5 until that last corner when the red flag came out, and it probably doesn't change anything, he said. But this going into the Parc Ferme, then opening it again, and that doesn't normally happen. VCARB boss Peter Bayer is grateful he's not the one who has to decide if Sergio Perez is ousted in favor of Liam Lawson over the summer break. Already said to be considering a mid-season driver swap, Perez didn't do himself any favors in qualifying at the Hungarian Grand Prix when he crashed at turn 8. Taking too much curb, the under-fire Red Bull driver lost control of the RB20 and crashed heavily, putting him out of qualifying at the very first hurdle. It was the 4th time in 6 races that Perez failed to make it out of Q1, which has cost him dearly in the championship as he scored just 11 points since his Monaco Q1 exit. His teammate Max Verstappen brought in 94 points. Helmut Marko confirmed after Perez's latest crash that Red Bull will sit down in the summer break to discuss their driver situation with team boss Christian Horner, saying they cannot run on one leg. While it was initially suggested Perez could make way for VCARB driver Daniel Ricciardo, more recently it is thought that it is reserve driver Lawson who is leading the running to replace Perez. The good news for Red Bull is the Kiwi told Bayer after his recent Silverstone test in the Red Bull that he feels the RB20 is an incredibly forgiving car compared to the VCARB. Thank God it's not my decision, it's up to Helmut and Christian, VCARB boss Bayer told motorsporttotal.com. Personally speaking, it's like everything in life. Every huge challenge is a huge opportunity. In this sport, that's just the way it is. Liam proved last year that he can handle the pressure under the most adverse circumstances. I spoke to him because he drove the Red Bull last week. He said that the car was really cool to drive because it was incredibly forgiving compared to our car. It is less prone to errors. At the same time, it drives incredibly sharply when you get to the front. It is a car that you have to master. It's not my decision, but each of the guys is confident enough to drive a car like that. Yuki Tsunoda also said it in the press conference, it's part of the training to get into a car like that and then risk everything and get going. Bayer reckons Perez's crash could not have come at a worse time for the 6-time Grand Prix winner. It's a slap in the face for Checo to be eliminated here in Q1, he said. There is still one race to come and we were told to keep a low profile until then. We are trying to get this issue out of our heads, also to perhaps take the pressure off the drivers. But it is difficult, he will not sleep well, I am quite sure of that. Red Bull won't only be looking at their driver situation for the final 10 races of this season, the summer break decision will also affect what happens next year. There is a lot to discuss, Bayer conceded. The Red Bull racing issue is up for discussion. For us, it's 2025. There is the question of timing. Do you take your time or give yourself a deadline? Is it summer or sometime in October? We have to look at that. Thanks for watching the video, everyone. I appreciate you guys watching the content.